My grandfather was a freedom fighter, and I was very attached to my grandparents. I remember that I was 7 years old in grade 2, and I was literate. My grandmother would always depend on me if she had to read something. That's what I observed. She became my first student, and in a couple of months, a literate. That was the real independence for my grandmother. I was in grade 2, so obviously I did not know a lot of things. But what I knew at that point in time instinctively was that I had this power to free people from illiteracy. The experience was able to let me pause and think that education was powerful and liberating. What if I told you in the 21st century? I'm quite sure most of you are going to be quite shocked hearing this. 21st century, I believe we care a lot more about the society these days. We have the power of technology. But what if I told you that 773 million people today are illiterate? To put that into perspective, that's the population of Saudi Arabia and Europe, the entire Europe combined. What if I told you that in Afghanistan, only 17% women are literate? I think you'll be quick to blame the Taliban and the 40 years of war for the same. And I agree with you. But then, what about our own country, India? What if I told you that the Mushar community in India that has produced icons like Sri Dashrath Manjhi, the mountain man of India, has a literacy, an overall literacy of just 3%? Needless to say, the pandemic has pushed the gaps further. The gaps that absolutely hurt me as an educator. The gaps that exist across the world. It's not just India, but across the world. The gaps that exist between students living in cities and the ones living in villages. When it comes to resources, the gaps that exist between students in high income schools and the ones in low income schools. 1.6 billion students have been affected by the pandemic, were out of school when the pandemic began. A majority of them are never going to return to school. And sadly, a big percentage of them are going to be girls. The pandemic has crushed our dream of excellent education access to every single child. We need to pause and rethink if there could be a way out. Imagine a student in any part of the country or the world who doesn't have a device during the pandemic. Or a situation that's very common in developing countries like ours, where the entire family is dependent on one device. The student wants to learn, but then cannot. Just cannot. We need to pause and rethink more than ever now as to how can these gaps be bridged. As in my views, education is more than a basic or fundamental human right. And every single kid should have access to an excellent education for a skilled world and for a transformed world. Talking about refugees, I have been asked this question a number of times by my students, by my friends, that why do I care so much about the refugee cause anyway? Well, what do I do if that one community, the refugee community, is one of the hardest hit communities in the world during the pandemic? What if I told you that today 1 out of every 100 of us on this planet is a refugee? The other data, which will again shock you or astonish you, is that if refugees were to form a country of their own, it would be the 22nd most populous country in the world. The population is going to probably be equal to or surpass that of Thailand. That's the number of refugees we have. So, anyone who's listening to me right now, if I ask you this question, will you ever, and I mean ever, under any circumstance, leave your home Just like that. No one becomes a refugee by choice. And therefore, I was very proud as an Indian to teach at the Malala Yousafzai All Girls School in Lebanon. Now, hear me out when I say this. I am a very proud and patriotic Indian. So, this Indian teacher was teaching Syrian refugee girls in a Lebanese school that was started by a Pakistani Nobel laureate. Why? Because we all were fighting for one common cause, and that is education for all, no matter what. And the value that was driving me to be a part of this change was an Indian value. The ancient Indian value of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, which means that the entire world is one community and that community is mine. It takes a village to raise a child is an African proverb. What if students feel scared? In my personal opinion, let me make it very clear, I strongly believe that India is a very, very tolerant country. There's no doubt about that. But if violence threatens a teenager, as a teacher, what can one do to ensure that every single child who's being taught, their minds are without fear and that their head is held high? After one of the communal clashes reported, one of my Muslim students came up to me and asked me if he was safe. He was quite terrified, and I could understand what was probably going on in his mind that made him ask his teacher that question. I had a long conversation with him, and I decided that let my actions speak louder than my words. I paused and I began to rethink of what could pull this child out of any thought that troubles him. I am a proud Hindu and I fast during Navratri every single year. That year during Ramzan, the holy month of Ramzan, when my students were fasting, I too would not eat. I would not feast when my students were fasting. And this little action had an impact that I just could have never imagined. My classroom had students from all different faiths. We had Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists in one classroom. We all learned and worked as one big family, celebrating each other's festivals, following our own traditions, but respecting everyone else's as well. I teach first generation college students because they need to be taught. They need to be made a part of the mainstream. I teach refugee children because I think they have suffered for no fault of their own. I teach kids with special needs to tell the world that they're damn smart. All they need is one chance, little belief, and lots of encouragement to shine and discover their potential. I teach adult women resuming studies because there's no age limit to learning. Well, coming back to the story, a year and a half later, when the board exam results were supposed to be declared, I was in Mumbai teaching another group of children. I get a call from the same boy who was scared a couple of years back, 1.5 years back. He felt really scared. He wanted to be in Mumbai and pray at the Haji Ali Dargah on the day of the result. That was what he wanted to do. But in 2017, the results were delayed a couple of times. So he couldn't be in Mumbai on the day of the result as he would have liked it to be. I still remember the date of the board exam result. I think it was 13th June 2017. I get a call from him and he wanted me to pray at the Haji Ali Dargah on his behalf. As a teacher and as an Indian, I had won This probably was one of the greatest moments of my teaching career. That when a boy who was scared a couple of years back now trusted me with his prayers. I prayed at the Siddhivinayak Mandir and the Haji Ali Dargah for all my students. Well, if you ask me, we need to teach our students about STEM, about how to excel in STEM. We need to teach our students to learn new languages, to be prepared for the skills of the future. But what we need to ensure for a better world is that every single student who we are teaching in our classrooms, they turn out to be wonderful human beings. I agree that teaching is a very tough job. I agree that there are 69 million vacant positions for teaching across the world. It is a tough job. It's a demanding job. But when my grandmother doesn't need my help to read, or when my student trusts me with his prayers, when Amruta, a wonderful student of mine, calls my classes the mitochondria of a school life, a term she has recently learned in her biology lessons, or when Sana, even I'm not that ambitious, I've never given it a thought, but then Sana is quite confident that her teacher is going to probably win the Nobel Prize. I hope the Nobel Committee is listening to this, Sana. When Jaymala Didi, who was a non-teaching staff with me at the same school, now aspires to be a teacher because she has seen the transformational stories around. When kids in Nepal give me a beautiful Nepali topi towards the end of my contract, or when kids in South Africa thank me by a loud namaste towards the end of my last class with them, I think it's all justified. It is because of these reasons precisely that I wake up every morning looking forward to teach and empower. I must conclude by saying that I teach because I care. Thank you so much.